as Alhambra. We walked around the city, ordered drinks at bars, just to get delicious tapas, and, most thrillingly, got engaged in the beautiful gardens of the Alhambra. It was the best vacation of my life. Until we went to Barcelona. That's not to say Barcelona isn't a beautiful, welcoming city, because it absolutely is. We stayed in a hotel outside Eixample. We ate more tapas and celebrated our new engagement. On the second to last day of our trip, however, we decided to pull ourselves away from Hamon long enough to visit something we had always wanted to see, the Basilica de la Sagrada Familia. If you've never heard of Sagrada Familia, Google it right now. It's simply one of the most stunningly beautiful buildings in the world. It's a church that famous Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí began constructing in 1852, and it looks like a structure from Tim Burton's Halloween Town was airdropped into a modern city. Gaudí never actually got around to finishing it. It's technically not finished even now, with the local government promising to wrap things up in 2026, the 100th anniversary of Gaudí's death. Neither Robin nor I are particularly religious. She's a lapsed Catholic, and I'm a lapsed nothing. But you don't need to be in touch with the Holy Spirit to marvel at the artistic and architectural brilliance that is the Sagrada Familia. We arrived midday on a Thursday to a much larger crowd than we anticipated. We had purchased tickets beforehand, but still needed to navigate a long security line. Once we made it through and onto the promenade of the building itself, I could only stare up in awe. Up close, we would swear that the thing was built by the angels themselves. The Sagrada Familia offers self-guided tours in which you visit a kiosk, select your language, and receive a bulky cell phone-like device that you can place against your ear and listen to facts about the Basilia as you walk along. We selected English, grabbed our phones, and advanced to a sign near the entrance that had a 1 on it. We picked up our audio devices and pressed the play button. Sure enough, the little display on the front read, 1, welcome. I brought the phone up to my ear and began listening to a British woman's soothing voice emanate from the receiver. Number 1, welcome. Welcome to the Basilia de la Sagrada Familia. In this section, you can see a map of the Basilia. Take your time to examine the floor plan and imagine what the cathedral inside may look like. As you advance, explore the Basilia. You will see numbered signs alerting you to listen and learn more about the pride of Barcelona. I smiled at my fiancée as she pulled the device away from her ear. We took some time to examine the map in front of us and the massive, pearly facade behind us. After a brief search for the second sign, we found it closer to the church's entrance. We counted to 3 and hit our play buttons at the same time, holding them back up to our ears. Number 2, the Basilia's origins. Architect Francisco del Paula del Villar began construction on the Sagrada family in 1882, but left the project just a year later due to disagreements with the direction of the Basilia. Antoni Gaudí then took over, recognizing the unique opportunity to keep evil in bondage. Gaudí knew that ancient Iberian texts uncovered in the 19th century revealed that the entity known as the Dread, or the No Thing, was buried under enchanted soil in the Catalan lands north of the Mediterranean. I pulled the device away from my ear again and looked at Robin to see if her face was showing the same signs of confusion mine surely was. But the little black box remained at her right ear, and she was looking up serenely at the cathedral's many spires. Hesitantly, I began to listen again. In fact, it is theorized that the turmoil in Spain following Napoleon Bonaparte's brief occupation may have been due to the influence of the Dread gathering strength from within the Earth's mantle. The primitive spells from Iberian tribes could only keep the No Thing restricted for so long. So, Gaudí sought to create a holy and mystical structure to make sure that the dread's influence would terrorize Europe no more. Please continue to the next station. I looked down at the device in my hand, expecting to see some sort of error message. Instead, the text, number 2, of Basilia's origins, glowed back at me, just visible in the sun's glare. What was this? The dread? The no thing? Had I picked up the wrong box? What did you think? I asked Robin as we walked towards the front facade. So cool, she said. I didn't know the spies were supposed to represent Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Jesus, but I suppose that makes sense. Right, I said. Definitely cool. We were in front of the facade now, and Robin was so excited that she began listening to the next portion without synchronizing with me. Feeling uneasy, I pressed play and brought the device to my ear. Number 3, the Nativity facade in the east and its corresponding Passion facade to the west are crucial to keeping the dread locked in and safely under the Basilia. The ancients knew that evil could be suppressed with magic, but didn't possess the technological capabilities to bind that magic with the physical world, creating an effective barrier. Gaudi knew that if the no thing was to stay entombed, the Basilia would need a gate. Gaudi turned to the Nativity and Passion Gospels from the New Testament. Constructed between 1894 and 1930, the Nativity facade was the first and most important facade to be completed. As it was constructed, some workers reported hearing growls. In the center, just above the main archway, you can see the marble statue of Mary, Joseph, and the Christ Child. Upon its completion, the sculptor, Francisco Olivas Oros, began to bleed from his palms. Gaudi's workers rejoiced at the sight of the stigmata before the man began to bleed from his eyes as well. He died, emaciated and drained, and was buried far away from the cursed grounds. Gaudi routinely consecrated the facade with holy water and prayer during construction. Still, at least 3 more men were driven mad and died at their own hand. One more, Guillem Domingo Acosta, went missing for 6 days, and his body eventually reappeared, inside out, next to the Barnum statue he had helped create. At the base of each column lies a turtle and a tortoise. Ancient sources suggest the dread may fear them. Periodically, the front gate will spontaneously drip blood and eventually form into untranslatable runes. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Barcelona has a special team of exorcists in place to monitor the facade and cleanse with holy water as needed. Please continue to the next station. I stood, rooted in my spot on the pavement. The Sagrada Familia before me. Suddenly, the Basilia seemed much more sinister and imposing than before. I could see Mary, Joseph, Jesus, and the turtles that the voice described, but I could barely comprehend everything else. Hey, I think something may be wrong with my listening thing, I said to Robin. What's wrong? Is it not saying anything? She said. For some reason, in that moment, I knew I couldn't tell her what I had heard. This is not the kind of thing that happens. Not the kind of thing that happens to a normal person, at least. Yeah, it's just, really quiet. The lady is, like, barely audible. That sucks. Well, let's switch listening things for the next round, then. Maybe I can hear it better. I was grateful to get the cursed objects away from me, but I didn't want to let my love in whatever prank was happening here. Still, curiosity got the best of me. I wanted to know what she'd hear. Sure, I said. We entered the building for the first time, and a chill rushed through me. The sweat I had gathered on my neck from the hot summer day turned to ice. We were in a stained glass forest now. Huge, tree-like marble columns extended into the sky, and the sun worked through the glass to cast the air itself in a warm red glow. The colors inside were vibrant, to the point that they felt sinister. The arched ceiling seemed to reach just as high into the heavens as the towers outside. More statues of religious figures dotted the hive-like walls surrounding me, each of them bearing down with a level of stern urgency. The room itself seemed to be breathing, pulsating with some powerful energy. With a ping of panic, I realized that my fiancée was already listening to the haunted black box. I looked at her face to see if she was disturbed by what she heard. She did not seem to be. I began listening to my new device as well. Number 4. Materials used. Sagrada Familia is an architectural marvel. On March 19th, 1882, the first stone was laid during a ceremony hosted by the Bishop of Barcelona, Josep Urquinaona. In the time since, many more stones have been placed along with some other materials that make up the beautiful, serene cathedral. First and foremost, the bell towers that were constructed during Gaudi's lifetime are made from Montjuic sandstone. This device was normal. Maybe it was just a problem with mine. I thought I'd feel relieved, but what I felt instead was the still, oppressive environment around me. I looked over at Robin, and her face didn't betray any sort of surprise at what she was hearing. It seemed like she was learning about Montjuic sandstone too. Hey babe, can I have my old thing back? This one sounds a little quiet to me too. It must just be my ears. I don't want you to have to deal with my sweat on the receiver. She seemed confused and a little annoyed, but she handed over my old device all the same. After I handed hers back, I resumed listening. In the end, the project is constantly evolving, and so will the materials needed to keep the dread at bay. God damn it. The device didn't even wait for me to press play again, but continued on its own to the next section. Number 5. The forest and interior of the Basilia. In prehistoric times, the Iberians would plant the tallest trees in the meadow upon which the cathedral now stands in an attempt to create a canopy to quarantine the dread's influence. It proved somewhat effective, as even though the woods came to be shunned by birds and animals, but not turtles, of course, instances of ritualistic suicides and death cults diminished through the region. But as the Iberians died out, the new cultures took control of the area. Forests were raised, and darkness spread across the continent once more. Gaudi paid homage to the original inhabitants of the land by constructing the pillars inside to resemble towering marble trees, as their effect had undeniable impact. In recent years, the columns have come to resemble bones more, as the dread slowly trickles its evil influence into the structure of the building itself. The nave is still used for occasional services today, but during the construction of the interior, workers would split into two groups, one that would work on the interior, and the other to kneel at the altar and pray continuously. It is known that an idle mind is most susceptible to the no-things influence, so Gaudi was careful to make sure every builder was either working or praying at all times. In a 1924 journal entry by Gaudi, he describes a tense moment in which a kneeling worker was only pretending to pray to receive a break from the demanding physical labor. While at the pew, the unnamed man burst into flames and burned down an entire section of the chamber. Please continue to the next station. I looked over to the open-air sanctuary on the cathedral's north side. I tried to imagine the little collection of pews being devoured by flames. For a split second, I thought I had brought an inferno into existence, but it was just a sunbeam puncturing the red vein of glass from the structure's ceiling. I looked at the ceiling and caught sight of the marble columns around me. The narrator wasn't wrong. They looked like bones now. Some kind of rib cage inside the grand leviathan. The building felt more alive than ever before. Slightly lightheaded, I grabbed Robin's hand and frantically searched for station number 6. This had to almost be over. I don't know how much more I could take. Unaware of my distress, Robin dragged me to the hallway just beyond the sanctuary to where a sign reading 6 stood. As if in a trance, I clicked play once more. Number 6. The Crypt. Look at the hallway's eastern wall and see if you can find a window near its base. Through this window, you can see another sanctuary, smaller than the one on the main level. Sure enough, the view from the window revealed a dimly lit sanctuary below ground. I could see quiet rows of handsome wooden pews, all positioned in front of the elevated platform. On the nave was something that seemed to resemble a gleaming white coffin. Antoni Gaudi lost his mind in the summer of 1926. As the main architect behind the project, he sustained exposure to the most constant levels of the dread's evil influence as anyone else involved. For the months preceding his death, he reported feeling more forgetful and often depressed. In the final week, however, he would frequently break away from medical staff and frantically dig through the earth just outside of the cathedral. He refused all food and drink and died on June 5th, 1926. It was later reported that he was struck by a tram and died in hospital to protect the man's integrity. Gaudi is entombed here in the crypt below the Sagrada Familia itself. This section is the darkest of the Basilia's chambers and is where the dread's influence is felt most acutely. Whereas it is usually safe to occupy the main level of the Basilia for several hours, the chamber below is considered unfit for human habitation and is only ever occupied for 10-minute shifts for emergency repairs. Please continue to the final station. I could not continue. In fact, I couldn't move. My eyes were riveted to the dusty white coffin in the room below. That's where Antoni Gaudi was, the man who took it upon himself to defeat the dread, or at least contain it. Wait, no, that's not real. None of this is real. I blinked, and my eyes were drifted to the pews in front of the casket. There were shadowy, human-like forms in a seated position around the pews. Suddenly, the lights in the sanctuary grew darker. I felt a hand on my shoulder and immediately screamed. "Oh, are you okay, babe?" Robin asked, removing her hand from my shoulder quickly. I looked around the hallway. A handful of tourists were looking at me, trying to find the source of the shriek. "Yeah, I'm okay. I guess I just spaced out for a bit. Actually, I think I might be getting sick or something. Can we go outside?" "Of course," Robin said. "Actually, I think that's where our tour ends anyway." "How do you know?" I asked. She held up a listening device, which was displaying the text, "Number 7, goodbye." As we exited the Basilia through the opposite door from which we entered, as soon as my face felt the open air again, I felt like a tremendous burden had been lifted from my shoulders. Blood and heat rushed back through my body, and my glasses fogged up. In front of us was a sign reading "Number 7. So we walked towards it and looked back up at the imposing structure. The Passion facade before me was a twisting panorama of tan bones and white statues. I pressed play one last time. "Number 7, goodbye." Construction on Sagrada Familia slowed after Gauda's death and eventually stopped altogether. The consequences were immediately apparent as influence of the No Thing spread. Fascism took hold in Spain, and Europe fell once again into war, eventually bringing the rest of the world along with it. Once the dread was momentarily sated with the blood of 90 million souls, a new architect, Francesc Quintana, once again took up Gauda's mission. Construction on the Passion facade, the final piece of Sagrada Familia's sacred puzzle, began in 1954. Though many of Quintana's workers reported hearing inhuman growls throughout the construction of the project, and no fewer than 6 more men committed suicide, the facade was structurally complete by 1974. The No Thing has been considered largely contained since 1974, though important work in Sagrada Familia of adding mystical ornamentation continues. every day that the Basilius stands is a well-won victory against the spread of dread, though our world may never truly know peace until the holy structure is finished. Thank you for visiting Sagrada Familia. Please return your listening device to the nearest attendant. We did as we were told, and began the short walk back to the metro station. Robin was abuzz with all the exciting new facts she had learned about the symbols in the holy structure. I didn't say much. Life went on, and we returned from our trip. Vacation pictures were posted, early wedding plans were made. But sometimes, late at night, when it gets real quiet, I swear, I can hear a low buzzing, sort of like a growl. I have worked as a paranormal investigator for close to 30 years. I always believed that there was more to our world than what most think. Like the submerged section of an iceberg, there is something under our choppy waters of regular existence. I suppose there is little other reason to take this job other than that belief. It certainly isn't for the money or respect. But I would be lying if I said my early years in this profession didn't test my faith in the existence of the paranormal world. For the first 4 years of my work, I found nothing. No evidence of a single paranormal phenomenon in any of the cases I took. There were hordes of unconfirmable ghost sightings, hauntings that were explained away by natural phenomenon, and even the odd prankster or two. I felt like I was floundering. I started to wonder if I had followed a road that led nowhere. My destination nothing but a hazy mirage perpetually on the horizon. That was, until I took a case in 1997. My most haunting case, still to this day. The case of the Grinning Man. Do you mind if I record this interview? I asked. No, that's okay, Audrey said. We were in the living room of a small home. Audrey sat on the sofa across from me, a 35-year-old woman that looked closer to 50. She was small, hunched over, as if a weight pressed on her shoulders. I placed the tape recorder on the coffee table and pressed the record button. Inside, the cassette tape whirred to life. Audrey, thank you for calling me to investigate your problem. I want you to know I'll take your claims seriously and investigate them as such. Whatever the outcome may be, if the phenomenon you're experiencing is paranormal or natural, I'll seek to find the truth the best I can. Thank you. Please, start from the beginning. She sighed and brushed some stray, frazzled hair behind her ear with one hand. I could see she was at her wit's end. Her face bore deep wrinkles beyond her age. Her eyes contained within dark purple sockets, and her nails chewed away to ragged edges. Whatever she was experiencing, paranormal or not, was certainly real to her. Okay, she began. I guess it all started when I was a baby. That far back. Yes, my first memories are of seeing him. Him? What I call the Grinning Man. She shuddered when she said it. The thing that's been haunting me my entire life. I can even remember him as a baby. It's burned into my memories. He dresses like someone from the 40s or 50s, with a tan trench coat and black fedora. I was laying in my crib when I first recalled seeing him. He gripped the crib's bars while he peered down at me through them, looming over a little, helpless me like an ominous mountain. Just thinking of it turns my stomach. And was he grinning at you? Yes, like he always is. Have you ever heard people describe a psychopath's grin, where their smile is there, it looks friendly enough, but if you look closely, You can see their eyes hold nothing. I think I understand. His smile is like that. It's like he has reptilian eyes, unfeeling, cold, predatory, evil. It must have had quite an impact on you, considering you remember it from that far back. Has he been cropping up your entire life? Yes, it's sporadic. Sometimes I go years without seeing him. Other times I'll see him multiple times a month. And what's a typical encounter like? Well, he'll appear out of nowhere. Then he stands as still as a statue and watches me with that sick grin of his plastered across his face. He could show up anywhere, at any time. Among the trees as I walk through the park, from a random house's window as I walk down the street. The shadows of my own home when I get a glass of water in the middle of the night. Does this entity ever say or do anything? No, always silent, always unmoving, just tracking me with his eyes. Interesting. Do you ever feel anything when you see this entity? Yes, an intense sense of dread and a tightness in the chest, almost like it's reaching out with imaginary, brooding fingers to squeeze my heart. And sometimes, when I see him, something terrible happens soon after. You mean that the sighting of the grinning man is a precursor to a traumatic event? Yes, not all the time, but enough that when I see him, my nerves will be shot, and I'll walk around with this dark cloud weighing on me as I wait for the worst to happen. Could you give me an example? Audrey sighed, and tears welled at the corner of her eyes. She averted a gaze and looked out the window. If it's too difficult, you don't have to. No, it's okay. She reached for the tissue box on the coffee table, took a couple, sniffled, and dabbed her eyes. The worst incident was in 1993. I had been married for 3 years and had just given birth to our first child. He was 4 months old at the time. I was back at work by then, and I was coming home very late one evening. The roads were dead. A bad storm had just passed through, and I still remember the long, colourful glows of the traffic lights and street lamps across the wet roads. I came to a stop at a red. I just happened to glance to my right. He was there, half covered in shadows. He stood on the pavement by the crosswalk. The walk signal glowing green, as if he meant to cross it. That grin had sunk my heart, as if it had turned into stone. I don't know exactly how long I stayed there, locked in his gaze. But when my light turned green again, I got out of there as fast as I could. When I looked in the rear view, I saw his silhouette in the street, watching me as I fled. I knew I'd struggled to sleep that night. I was shaking and felt like throwing up. I had to take a Valium, and that helped. I popped into bed and passed out more than fell asleep. I was awoken by my husband frantically shaking me in the morning. His face was pale, a look of sheer, terror-filled panic I had never seen before. Our son had passed away in the night. The death was ruled as a SIDS case. I sat in silence, giving Audrey a moment as she let her emotions out. At the time, I wasn't sure what to think. Her story was unique, far from the standard ghostly apparitions others saw. I was intrigued. I did wonder if it was a mental condition. I had encountered a schizophrenic who would believe that hallucinations were a result of paranormal phenomena on a previous case, though their condition had been more apparent, even to me. If Audrey was ill, it was not obvious. Audrey, have you seen any medical professionals? It is possible that your sightings could be hallucinations. Yes, I have. I had kept the grinning man a secret my entire life. After all, who would believe me? I even kept it from my husband. But after our son had died, I had to tell him. I don't know why, but I just did. He was obviously concerned for me, my mental health. He wanted me to see a therapist. I refused at first. We had a lot of fights about it, and eventually he forced me to go see someone. What did they say? Well, I was put through the ringer. Eventually, I was diagnosed with psychosis. I was put on meds, went to therapy twice a week, and none of it helped. He would still show up. Eventually, I quit the meds, quit the therapy. Waste of time and money, as far as I was concerned. But my husband thought different. He didn't like that I quit all of it, and our marriage kind of fell apart from there. But I still am, convinced what I was experiencing is real. That's why I came to you. I figured someone like you would at least take my story seriously. I nodded. I do. And there's another reason I sought you out. Please. Well, I need help. I've been seeing the grinning man a lot more lately. He's been appearing more frequently than ever before. How often? Very few nights for the past 2 or 3 months. He only shows up at night now, usually outside my bedroom window. And I did see him in the hallway last week. I never used to sleep with my bedroom door closed, but now I do. I don't know if I can take it much longer. My nerves are shot. Dread suffocates my chest all the time. I think something terrible is going to happen soon. I'm scared of what he might do to me. But you can prove it, right? You can prove he's real. You can help me get rid of it, right? I'll try, Audrey. I'll try. After the interview, I tested a home for electromagnetic fields. Strong EMFs can often be responsible for hallucinations of apparitions, or that creepy feeling that elicits goosebumps on the back of your neck. It often causes people to believe they're experiencing a haunting. In reality, it's usually just poor electrical wiring, or old and dirty wall sockets bleeding electricity into the environment. Those EMFs can mess with people's senses. Though Audrey sightings of the grinning man are not tied to a particular location, I figured EMFs may be responsible for her lasting string of sightings that occurred primarily in a bedroom. But after a sweep of the house, I detected nothing abnormal. I then set up a camera and a tripod in her bedroom. It sat beside the head of the bed and had a complete shot of her room, including the window on the opposite wall and the door on the right that led into the hallway. Both places she had seen the grinning man previously. I showed her how to record and instructed her to do so when she went to bed. I also gave her a nightlight to plug into an outlet so the camera could see. Night vision and thermal imaging cameras were well within my budget back then. And I swung by her house the next 2 mornings to collect and review the tapes. Those nights were uneventful. On the third night, I got a frenzied call from Audrey. The ringing jarred me awake. The clock on my nightstand read 2:08 a.m. I trudged to the phone, and as soon as I answered, Audrey's frantic voice came over the line. "He was here. He tried to hurt me." I arrived at Audrey's a little over half an hour later. She paced back and forth in the living room, a neglected cigarette burning in her hand, the ash tip grown long and pale as bone. She muttered one thing over and over. "No escape, no escape, no escape." It took a minute to calm her down. At first, she looked right through me, as if I weren't there. Her eyes distant and fear-stricken, as she continued to mutter, "Can't escape, until the words burned into my ears. I eventually ushered her into the kitchen and sat her down. I found some cocoa in the cupboards and made her a warm cup. It seemed to help a little. Her trembling stopped. "I'm going to watch the tape," I said. "Do you want to watch it with me?" She shook her head adamantly. She waited in the kitchen while I watched. She had a VCR player hooked up to a CRT television in her living room. I sat on the edge of the coffee table, rather than the sofa, for a closer view. I inserted the tape, and the TV came to life with a view of Audrey's home bathed in dim orange from the nightlight, and the window at the far end shined with a pale glow from the moon. The footage wasn't great, being comparatively rudimentary for what we have today. The picture quality was grainy, and sometimes wavered in the way those VCR tapes did, but it was enough to see what I needed to. I fast-forwarded the tape until the text on the bottom right corner read 1:30 a.m. I sat with a pen and notepad in hand, and I still have my notes from what I saw on the tape. 1:30 a.m. Audrey asleep in bed, nothing untoward. 1:35 a.m. Audrey becomes visibly restless, flipping and turning violently in her sleep. 1:38 a.m. Audrey settled. 1:40 a.m. Dark figure crossed the window on opposite wall. 1:42 a.m. Dark figure crossed window again in opposite direction. 1:44 a.m. Dark figure standing in front of window. Figure looks like a person, possibly wearing a hat. Figure too dark to make out features. 1:46 a.m. Static, intermittently breaking up picture. Figure still standing at window. 1:50 a.m. The figure disappeared. Did not walk or move away. Simply vanished. 1:51 a.m. Audrey becoming restless again. 1:52 a.m. Bedroom door opened. That was the last note I took. My heart was pounding in my ears by this point. A few seconds after, the door had opened, seemingly by itself. The man appeared from the darkness in the hallway, like a demon emerging from the depths of hell. I dropped my notepad and gawked at the television screen. Even through the grainy footage and the worsening bursts of static, I could make out the grin plastered across the figure's face. A grinning man. The nightlights suddenly went out, and the screen went black. It took a few moments for the lens to adjust to the dimmer moonlight coming through the window, and when it did, the grinning man was a dark silhouette just inside the doorway. I stood and approached the television, bent over at the waist, face inches from the screen to get a closer look.
It's like clicks.
The tape wavered badly, making everything unrecognizable. When the picture cleared, the grinning man had teleported from the doorway to the bedside, just in front of the camera. He peered down at Audrey. My heartbeat thumped steadily in my ears. The picture wavered again, for longer. When it steadied, the grinning man had his arms extended downward towards Audrey. She was now kicking and thrashing in bed. The grinning man's hands appeared to be clasped around her throat. The blanket was flung from the bed suddenly, a big dark cloud moving across the screen. Audrey thrashed, and the grinning man held on. The moonlight glanced off his teeth, making a diabolic grin, a glimmering silver blemish at the base of his darkened face. Like his grin, his eyes shined palely with manic glee. A prolonged burst of static. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The picture came back. The nightlight was on, and Audrey sat upright in bed, grasping at her neck. The grinning man was gone. I felt something in the air then, like heavy humidity. A powerful feeling that pervaded the house. A feeling of anger. The VCR tape paused by itself, then began to rewind. The tape whined frantically inside the player at a high pitch. The picture on the screen sheared and went black. Smoke seeped from the vents of the player and around the edges of the opening flap. I mashed the eject button, hoping to save the tape, but the crinkling noise that sounded like crumbling cellophane left me with little confidence. The flap turned back and the tape flew out as if shot from a cannon. The mess of cracked casing and wadded tangled tape hit me in the chest and fell to the floor. The television flew off the cabinet suddenly, pushed from an unseen force, and landed before my feet with a scream shattering. Audrey came in from the kitchen, alarmed. She glanced at the TV, laying busted on the floor, then the tape next to me, and then at me. What happened? He's real, I said, breathlessly. I saw it on the tape. He's real. Perhaps it was foolish to simply believe leaving the home would have helped, but it was the only thing I could think to do. I took Audrey to a nearby hotel and booked us into neighbouring rooms. I sat on the edge of my bed at a loss. I had completely underestimated what we were dealing with. Until watching that tape, I wasn't even sure the entity was real. But not only was it real, it was dangerous. I found a close acquaintance, one that wasn't so happy to be woken at 3 in the morning, who worked for another paranormal investigation team. He was happy to help once I explained the seriousness of the situation. He gave me the number of a good medium who could help give me a reading, perhaps to identify what we were dealing with. I was also hoping she might have known methods to banish the entity from Audrey's life, if it were at all possible. I decided to call the medium first thing in the morning, but it would be too late for her to do anything by then. I lay down in the bed, my thoughts swimming in a fuzzy haze of fatigue and the come down of an adrenaline spike. I realized that, for the first time, with true conviction, I'd encountered something under the surface of the normal world. Something sinister hiding in those deep and dark, murky waters below. You can live your life pretending that world is not real. Many do. And sure, chances are you'll never be affected by it. But you should know, that world is real. And it's there, lurking in the darkest shadows around us. With some difficulty, I eventually fell asleep. The short doze from 3 to dawn was restless. I had a nightmare I was drowning in black sludge, as dark as the starless night sky above me. My arms and legs struggled through thick and oily liquid as I fought to keep my head above the surface. My breath cut short, and my chest squeezed tight. Panic flooded in through every pore of my body as the presence of an evil prickled my skin. And then, darkness. I awoke to sunlight glowing around the edges of the grimy motel curtain. The bedsheets were a scrunched up mess, and my blanket lay strewn over the floor. With a sick feeling creeping in my gut, I realized how the scene closely mirrored what I saw in the aftermath of the attack on Audrey. I rushed out of my room to Audrey's next door. She didn't answer the first few knocks, so I knocked louder. No answer. I called her name and pounded on the door. Still no answer. I rushed to the motel's front desk, convincing them to let me into the room. When we entered, Audrey was in her bed. Her pale face poked out from the blanket. Her lips were blue, her eyes vacant and lifeless, stared at nothing. My heart plummeted. She was dead. I dream of that morning often. The moment we walked into that godforsaken room to see Audrey drained of life. I'll never forget that. The case has stuck with me all these years. I pored over the details many times. I relive my actions and question if there was more I could have done. I try not to blame myself. I know it's not healthy. But I just can't lift the weight of guilt that still sits on my shoulders. Or perhaps it's my liver that takes the brunt. Fact is, as I see it, she came to me for help, and I did not do enough. I wish I could tell you I got revenge on this thing, that I tracked the entity down and vanquished it like a hero at the end of a Hollywood action movie. But life doesn't tend to work like that. Besides my experience with Audrey and that close brush I had that night in the dingy motel room, I've yet to cross the path of the grinning man ever again. But that's the nature of this line of work. Things don't get wrapped up and topped off with a neatly tied bow. We deal with things that are on the edge, things that straddle the line between the world we know and the one we don't. Things are hazy, transient, and often unknowable. Neat resolutions don't find their way to us easily. I can tell you that Audrey's death was eventually ruled as a case of sudden arithmetic death syndrome, or SADS. As you can probably guess, I have some doubts that that was all there was to it. I still call the medium. We met a couple of weeks after Audrey's passing. We went to the motel and booked the same room Audrey had died in. The work at the desk was certainly curious as to why I insisted on that room, but I refused to say. The medium's face drained of colour the second she stepped inside. She walked around the room in silence for 10 minutes. She moved slowly, intently, closing her eyes and breathing deep as she tapped into a strange, ominous world. Can't say I envy her talent. Something incredibly powerful, she eventually said. It's not here now, but I can still feel its vestiges. How long ago did this happen? A little over 2 weeks. A grave expression crossed the medium's face. Yes, very powerful. Do you know what the entity is? Not precisely, but I can say that its soul is black and twisted. That thing has a soul? All intelligent forces do? And what do you mean by black and twisted? I mean, the entity is a corrupted agent of death itself. I was speechless for a moment, as the weight of her words robbed me of breath. A drip coming from the sink in the bathroom was the only thing to break the crushing silence. What can we do about it? I asked. The medium smiled wistfully. At my naivete, I assume. I was young and inexperienced and ready for a fight. She knew that. Then her expression grew dark as she took one last look over the room. Not a thing, she said. Stay at home and go anywhere. That was the clever little headline that pulled me into all of this. I could almost hear the marketing department getting a raise. Neural empathy hardware is what it stood for. just an innocuous post on a harmless messaging board. The body of the text detailed a device, still in its testing phases, that was searching for willing participants to try out the tech. I can't find the initial post as it has since been deleted, but I remember vaguely how it was structured. Are you a homebody? Is a quiet night in more appealing than subjecting yourself to the dangers of the world? Are you looking for an adventure without the cost or the risk? Then sign up as a gazer here and be connected to adventures all over the globe from the comfort of your own home. Are you an adrenaline junkie? Do you live your life between the trees or on top of the oceans and want people to experience all the wonders you do? Then sign up as a pioneer and allow others to view the world through your eyes. There's a big world out there, and you can help everyone see the best parts. It was one of those things I stumbled across that just screamed, too good to be true at me. Even as I clicked the sign-up link, I was only asked my address. No monetary exchange was requested, and I was told that I'd receive my headset in a matter of days if I was selected. Another day went by, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that I had, in fact, been selected. My skepticism remained until I found a small white box, lacking any labels, sitting all alone on my front porch. I brought it inside and opened it to find a lightweight, sleek black device that looked fairly similar to a VR headset. Quickly, I read through the instructions and slid the headset over my eyes. With a simple press of the button, the headset sprung to life, and my once dark view shifted into a graphic of the Earth rotating in space. There was a small whirring of fans that continued circulating air to keep my head cool, but other than that, the immersion was immediate. Noise-cancelling headphones also cupped over my ears, blocking out the outside world. I zoomed into the Earth and saw a plethora of dots littered around the landscape, each of them denoted with Pioneer, followed by a set of numbers. I could also see in the corner that I was designated as Gazer 64. Before long, I found a dot that was sitting near the coastline, and when I thought about how it'd be nice to see the ocean, my view closed in. Within the time it took me to blink, I was amazed to find I was looking out at a gorgeous crystal blue expanse of water. Pioneer 084 was just sitting within the sand and looking out at the ocean. It was incredible. You know how the mind can sometimes convince itself into feeling certain sensations? My mind was going into overdrive with that. The view on my end was so pristine and clear that it was as if I was really seeing it with my own eyes. The noise from the gentle winds and the shifting waves poured into my ears. I could feel the wind, cool but comforting, and I could smell the salty aroma the ocean was giving off. I was there. I had forgotten that I was wearing a headset, and was all but completely convinced that I was sitting on a beach. The only thing that was anchoring me into the reality that I was sitting on my couch was my desire to see more. With the span of 2 hours, I went stargazing with Pioneer 014 and bike riding through the thick wilderness with Pioneer 225. Each and every dot that I decided to visit would take me somewhere new and fantastic. I've never been skydiving or cave exploring, but I felt my heart racing as I plummeted from the sky or heard the cool dripping of water as I've explored dark caves. The implication